This is the Constitutional Podcast, well, that Constitutional Crisis Podcast, with your hosts Marquis Smalls and John Michael Reefer, and we are currently on the precipice of the big ugly bill being passed by Congress right now. They are currently in debate. Where last I saw, Hakeem Jeffries was 4.5 to 5 hours into speaking on the bill and trying to encourage some Republicans to vote against it. And here we are on July 3rd, the day before President Trump's self imposed July 4th deadline to get this bill passed. And we're looking at the Constitution just so we can help people understand exactly what your options are and how to actually either join in or to actually oppose what's going on currently in our nation and in our government. So, John, currently, what's some of the thoughts that you got around current state of affairs in the United States of America?
Well, the first thing I want to say is thank you everyone for joining us. My most prescient thought is we need to read. We need to read more. People need to read the Constitution, develop an understanding of what it means, what it represents, so we can have a clear, bright line about what's going wrong. I think a lot of the conversations that are happening in a vacuum, a bunch of eggheads screaming, "This is illegal! This is illegal!" And people that are not familiar are saying, "What are you talking about? He's doing exactly what we want, um, and the thing that you want is illegal." And
Well, yeah,
I think we need to make it clear. The simplest thing, asylum, the seeking of asylum in the United States, the system has been corrupted. I grant that, but the system exists. And based on early World War II, the Americans refused the Jews access to safety, and they've since regretted that. So they wrote the asylum laws in the 1980s to say, if you are persecuted where you come from, you can come and seek shelter with us. And you don't we don't have to automatically grant you asylum, but the law is written such that you get to apply and your case gets adjudicated. The current administration is like, listen, we're not taking anybody. We're not taking
that's
any
South Africans.
except South Africans, which is ridiculous. I think that if in fact the administration's position is they don't want people to come, then you do what you're supposed to do. You go to Congress and you say, can I have more money for judges? Can I have more money for asylum attorneys? So we can process the tens of thousands of cases that are coming in every day that we want to deny legitimately. We need to process every single one of them. The Trump administration is saying, you know what? We're not even going to pick up the phone. How about that? We just won't pick up the phone. Well, no, we didn't have any calls today because we didn't pick up the phone.
Right.
So I think that we need to be clear about what the rules are. The Constitution lays out a set of rules of how we are to be governed, how we are to be protected, and how we are to push back if we are aggrieved. And if we're not going to follow those rules, it's anarchy. It's not even chaos. It's anarchy. Because the moment we agree that we're not going to follow the rules, why not just rob all the banks? Why not just rob all the dealerships?
Yeah.
Why not just kill the person who slighted you in high school? Why not let's just go kill them?
Well, I hope it doesn't actually get to that point. But just to bring people up to speed, today we're going to be focusing on the amendments to the Constitution of the United States as ratified by the states. So, just to bring people up to speed, when you think about the document in itself, it was written, and we've already covered the first three articles that focused on the legislative branch, the judicial branch, and the executive branch, and what their responsibilities and powers might be. And then before the document actually got to be enforced, they decided that in 1781, they were going to put out these amendments called the Preamble to the Bill of Rights. And so there's the first 10 amendments of the Constitution that we want people to really understand is the foundation of what American citizens have as the rights that you can have. So Amendment 1 speaks to shall pass no law representing an establishment of religion. So that's basically where you get to practice whatever religion you want, right? So you have freedom to that. Amendment 2 is one that most people know about because it deals with the ability to hold arms and whether or not people can actually bear arms and protect themselves. And so those two are the main ones that most people know about. But then if you get into Amendment 3, you're talking about no soldier, and this comes from the American Revolution, where soldiers were actually being allowed to stay in the homes of colonists. And so that amendment was important to people because they didn't want soldiers to be able to now be stationed in your home, sleeping with your children without your permission. Then Amendment 4, the right of people to secure their persons. Basically, again, your property cannot be seized or searched without your permission or without a warrant. Amendment 5, no person shall be held to answer for capital or otherwise infamous crime. This speaks to, and especially in today's litigious and criminal enterprise world that we're dealing with, that speaks to your Fifth Amendment rights around being charged with the crime. Amendment 6 deals with um, all criminal prosecutions of the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial, which again, this is what John has alluded to with the illegalities of the ICE enforcement and not even providing people with due process in a court of law to actually present their case before being shipped off to gulags and other countries. Then you had Amendment 7, which, in the suits of common law, and these go to civil suits, the value and how much you can actually be sued for and how that can be paid out. Amendment 8 deals with excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishment, which again speaks to some of the treatment of not only citizens and immigrants, but also to protesters. And think about that because the right to protest is in one of the first amendments as well. And then Amendment 9 speaks to the uh, numeration of the Constitution of certain rights shall not be confined to, or denied to disparage others retained by the people, which means basically your representatives are your voice. And then Amendment 10, the powers not delegated to the United States by the Congress nor prohibited by it to the states are reserved to the states, respectively, or to the people. So again, it goes back to the people being the ones who actually get to determine what is going on in our nation and how this document was meant to empower the people against just one particular person running the government or even one particular party running the government. So, John, what stands out to you in those first 10 Bill of Rights amendments that really you feel are most important that people should understand?
Well, I think it's important to understand the due process. Uh, if you're accused of something, you need the right to defend yourself. You need to be able to gather evidence, present evidence. Um, so that's one. And then I think the other one is the First Amendment. The First Amendment allows for you to express yourself. And the current president is doing, and the administration is doing everything they can to curtail and suppress. And in some points, some opportunities, they're looking for opportunities to censor what information people can share, what information they can access. It's very important you have all the information. So the decision that you're making is based on information, and you can do that with a clear eye. Because right now we're running on emotion, and the emotion is fueled by propaganda and misinformation. And we're at the mercy of taglines. You know,
And lies, and lies. And so,
well,
with you bringing that
lies,
up,
lies, lies.
yeah.
So everyone needs to really sit and be clear about this. He is a lying liar who lies and steals. And that's no way to run a government. That's no way to run a country. And that does not, a lying liar benefits one person, the liar.
Yeah,
So even if you are completely in support of this racist agenda of the administration, it's not going to benefit you. It's going to benefit the lying liar.
well,
So
that is
we
true.
really need to figure out, do we want to have a country where people have dignity and opportunity? And if that's not what they want, then we won't be a country much longer.
Yeah, and the interesting thing that you just said, I think that's coming out right now is that I do believe that they want certain people to have dignity and opportunity, but I do believe that that certain type of person, for one, does not look like us, and two, is more in line with those who already have accumulated the wealth on the backs of, generational atrocities that have been, created to accumulate that wealth. And so now they're catering to their, most wealthiest constituents in ways that have never been done before, and especially in this new bill that they're pushing through Congress right now. And so, just because you mentioned it, I'm going to go back to Amendment 1 and read it in its totality just so that people understand it, because I do feel like it is the most important amendment and the most important set of rights that people understand, which is why a reason I think that they made sure that it was the first one. It explicitly says Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech or the press or the right of the people peaceably to assemble, which again speaks to protest, and to petition the government for redress of grievances. So basically, that First Amendment is what gives us the right to protest. It gives us the right to push back. It gives the press the right to actually report the news. And even now, we have the one conflict around even the Iran report, where now there's threats about going after the press for reporting what they claim is a leaked report around the severity of the actual damage that was done to the Iranian nuclear facilities. And so even that's being challenged today, which speaks directly to, as you brought up earlier, John, the illegalities of what are totally opposed and not even in this document of the highest order. And so when you think about that, people, you're talking about your freedom of religion, which again, that's where no religion, Jewish, Muslim, Christian, doesn't matter. Even agnostics that choose not to believe, like, should not and should never be persecuted for their beliefs, right? Then you have the ability to speak freely, right? To speak out about what you feel like is a grievance or what you feel like the government is doing wrong, which in some respects, as you can get, especially from my co-host, John, he actually speaks his grievances about this government and this president quite often. So he has that right. So,
But I think even if you're opposed to this administration, the people who are in the quote unquote MAGA movement, they have the right to publicly support this administration. So the knife of the First Amendment cuts both ways,
yes.
and people are behaving like is it's not available to everybody, and it is designed to be available to everybody. I
Yeah.
think the other real issue uh, is a little bit further along, which is the birthright citizenship issue. But I think
Yeah.
again, if we are not going to adhere to the rules as they've been agreed upon and written, then what are we doing?
Well,
What
yeah.
in fact are we doing? Because if you're challenging them, if you're challenging the rules, then you go to the courts for redress. If you're ignoring the rules, then that's autocracy, that's dictatorship, that's fascism. And if that's what y'all want, God bless y'all.
Well, yeah, and I think that that's really where, again, going back to your point earlier about the talking points. You know, I think people hear that term fascism and still don't even really understand what exactly it means, especially in comparison to what democratic government is designed to be. And so, um, to a lot of people, I feel like it comes across as just a word or something that, reminds people of early World War II, different regimes like in Italy or even in Germany, and they don't really equate it to what we're actually witnessing and experiencing right now, as far as usurping the government and bending it to fit their own specific agenda. Which again, like if you're living in today's world, you see that these decisions are being made to fit a certain agenda, and they even refer to, and that's the tricky thing about language. It's constantly referred to as Trump's agenda, right? But the the powers that be, and particularly the media itself, are not digging deeper into what exactly does that mean, and why does a president of the United States have their own agenda in the first place, and why are they not ruling in the sense of um, leading for the people, especially when we're talking about this document starting out with "We the People."
Right. I would respond to what you're suggesting by saying the quietest part out loud. The media, our media broadly has been corrupted by corporate and are sustained by spectacle. So the agenda that the president's put forward does not meet the needs of the people, and they are not interrogating the case clearly at all. That he's not doing anything that's going to help the 360 million people that live in the United States. Jasmine Crockett is quoted a couple of days ago. The United States has 38 billionaires, and it would appear that the Trump's agenda is tailored to those 38 constituents,
Well, yeah, I would
which
totally agree with
is
that.
outrageous, which
Yeah.
is completely outrageous.
Yeah, and, and
Um,
and the saddest part about that is you're talking about minority rule in the clearest sense, and you're also talking about catering to the people who, for the most part, are choosing not necessarily to use their wealth as ways to better conditions and to improve the conditions of this planet, or especially even let's just focus specifically on our nation, but only to improve their livelihoods in a way that will currently disparage and take away the livelihoods of people who are just really trying to exist. And so we really have to keep that in mind as we're going forward. And I wanted to just kind of confront it directly as to what you said, because I've been a firm believer for a long time around, corporate interests becoming more important than the people's interests for generations now. I go back to the 80s and even moving into the Clinton era, and not to put any blame on the economic boom that we experienced during the 90s with the Clinton era, but to really look at, like, that's really where a lot of the ideology shifted from, coming up with programs that actually helped communities, and from pre-K and AmeriCorps, and all the different things that really helped people coming into and getting through college, and Pell Grants, and all the stuff that was coming in as supports, as well as Medicaid, and then eventually the ACA, and all the things that have been strong Democratic, um, wins on legislation over the years, are now pretty much being rolled back in a way to now make it more of a, dog eat dog world of, okay, if you got it, then you're good. But if you don't have it, we're not going to do anything to help you. And that is so sad.
well, but this administration is going beyond that particular pale. This administration is saying, not only are we not going to help you, this administration is saying, listen, we found you, we've targeted you, and we are going to do everything in our power to grind you into pulp.
Well, yeah, like, I think the interesting thing about it too is the one thing I do like about the moment is that there is no um, give up, and there is definitely a fight and a pushback. It's sad to see it mainly only coming from one side of the political spectrum, as far as the Democratic side pushing back, and even with the hope that there was last night of the four Republicans who initially put in no votes on advancing the bill to be voted upon and accepting it in its returned amended form from the Senate. There were four initial no votes on the Republican side, but then they all changed their mind except for one person. And so it eventually wound up where only one Republican sided with the Democrats to to oppose the bill. And so now today is where they're actually debating it more and moving it into the actual final vote. Which again, there is some hope that people could eventually grow a conscience and grow a spine and vote against things that they know are going to impact tens of thousands of constituents in their districts, and particularly their own rural hospitals in their own areas. But we'll see if party and allegiance to Trump actually wins out in today's vote.
I would say the vote in the Senate, the performance in the Senate was just that, a performance. They were always going to pass the bill. They were always going to pass the bill. Um, the agenda of this administration is cruelty. They the Congress and the Senate have bought into that cruelty as a way to hold on to power, and they are they're just being cruel. One of the amendments in this bill is if you can't afford to have internet access, then you will not qualify for SNAP benefits. That's the litmus test they're using.
Right.
So that's simple cruelty. We live in the information age. If you don't have internet access, you can't get a job, you can't do your studies, you can't get a driver's license, you can't get your health records, you can't talk to a doctor. So to zero in on that amenity of human life as a reason for you not to have food, cruelty is the point. And I think inside the context of the Constitution wasn't meant to be kind, but it wasn't designed to be cruel.
Oh yeah, for sure. And just to go back and correct myself from earlier, I said 1781, but I want to read specifically when the Bill of Rights was created. The first 10 amendments to the Constitution were ratified December 15th, 1791, and form what is known as the Bill of Rights. And when you get into what the purpose of the Bill of Rights, were, it basically says, the Congress of the United States begun and held at the city of New York on Wednesday, the 4th of March, started the conversation around putting this together, and it was eventually passed in December. But the covenants of the number of states having at the time of their adoption of the Constitution expressed the desire. So the states expressed this desire in order to prevent misconstruction or abuse of its powers. So again, this was the states, and this is where, if you notice, for people who may not be aware of all of the injunctions and all of the civil lawsuits that are being filed by state attorney generals, this is the mechanism that has been put in place to actually provide the pushback that we're speaking about, that people can continue to have their voices heard and actually challenge a lot of these rulings in the current administration. And so you have further declaratory and restrictive clauses should be added. And as extending the ground of the public confidence in the government will ensure the benefit ends of its institution. So they wanted people and the states specifically to be able to challenge the notion of oversight from the government and be able to actually create confidence in the government. And what do you think about that right now, John? Do you think people, at least in your circle, do you think people have confidence in our government right now?
People's confidence in the government is very low, and it should be. The government broadly has not been operating to the benefit of the populace. Uh, Special interests, and if you start as low as the state level or at local level. I live in New York City. The lobbyists in the real estate industry uh, shape legislation. And you go to the state level, it's lobbyists again for big tech, real estate, big pharma, construction. They shape legislation. And on the federal level, it's many interests: tech, pharma, banking, real estate. So we have no confidence in the government because the government is not operating to protect all of us. And maybe in this current iteration of governance, people will wake up to that idea and demand that the government operate to protect all of the citizens as opposed to 83 of the citizens.
True indeed. True indeed. And with that said, I'm just going to expand on how that process works, right? So resolved by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America. This is the process, people, by which you can continue to push things through in your own state. And we should always be focused on, um, the options we have within our own localities and communities. So, representatives of the United States of America in Congress assembled two-thirds of both houses concerning the following articles be proposed to the legislatures of the several states as amendments to the Constitution of the United States, all or any of which articles, when ratified by three-fourths of the said legislature. So that means basically any amendment. And this is where if people ever have an idea around, okay, so why don't we just propose, more amendments? Or why don't we change the Constitution even more? It's really not that easy, because what you need to do, even if the Congress decided to vote in terms of two-thirds of its members, which again, right now we see we can barely get past the majority vote, that if they did get the two-thirds to present an amendment, they would still need to get three-fourths of the 50 states, which is approximately 37, 38 states that would have to agree to those amendments for it to actually pass. So that's one of the reasons why there hasn't been really a lot of new amendments to the Constitution since even, the early 90s. So just want people to understand that. And then lastly, articles in addition to an amendment of the Constitution to the United States of America proposed by Congress and ratified by the legislatures of the several states pursuant to the fifth article of the original Constitution. And that's what we're going to get into in our next episode, which speaks to Article 5. And so people can also continue to see how over the next year or so leading up to the midterms, you can really truly understand what the purpose of this document is and how your rights as a citizen, and particularly how important your vote is, not just in the presidential election. And that's the other thing I'm hoping that people expand upon. Like, it's not just about the presidential election, people. It is really more so about your local voting power to enact and empower your congressperson in the House of Representatives that is truly created to represent the people, which again, now you can see are the ones pushing this bill through. And then also your senators, as well as your school board members, as well as your local mayor, and especially in New York City with the mayoral race coming up. Um, in my own state right now, Virginia, we have the governor's race coming up this year. So, like, we really need to focus locally to make sure that we can strengthen our say and our ability to push back against some of these draconian laws that are being enacted right now on the local level, but then also carry that to the national level as well when the major elections come up, particularly in the midterms and again in 2028 for the presidency. So, with that said, in closing, John, you got any final thoughts for people on the Bill of Rights and just what you would like people to pay most attention to when it comes to their rights as American citizens, and even those who want to become citizens? Because I'm just going to bring up a perfect example of how someone who followed the naturalization citizenship pipeline, your current Democratic primary winner, Mamdani,
Ziran
yeah,
Mandani.
right? He was not born a citizen and actually came to America as a 7-year-old, but took the process to become a naturalized citizen, which again is in the Constitution. If you become a naturalized citizen, you are able to run for office. And
That's right.
so, and so that's a perfect example of how this process can play out when done correctly, and when immigrants are actually given a pathway to citizenship that can be enacted. And for some reason, we're finding that this same pathway that this mayor or potential mayor took to get where he's at is now being thrown all kind of shade by even our current president, talking about he wants to revoke his citizenship and even enact, and people hearing that alone should just be appalled by the fact that you would have a sitting president speak to taking away someone's citizenship who actually already has done the process in place legally to gain that citizenship and to win the Democratic primary, to only be now threatened by the sitting president, as if that in itself is going to do anything to make our country better. Um, so, what are some of your final thoughts today on Bill of Rights and where we're at moving forward for the people to actually, think about, actions they can take to continue to stay in this fight.
Well, I think what I'd like to say to our listeners and viewers, the most important thing you can do today is find out what district you live in. What district are you in? Once you discover that, you'll see who the representatives are that are representing you. And then you should go to them with the Bill of Rights and ask them, what do they believe in? What are they supporting? Are they supporting an agenda based on what this country is founded on or something else? So I implore everyone listening and watching this, what district do you live in? Once you've discovered the district you live in, who represents you from the local level to the state level to the federal level? And you should make a list of all those numbers and email addresses and mailing addresses and reach out to every single one of them and ask them, how are they protecting your Bill of Rights in this country in this very fraught time of uncertainty and chaos?
Right. So just to repeat my statement, go in and find out what your local representative's voting record is. What laws are they actually saying yes to and no to? And so that you can know for sure who's representing you in the correct way that you want to be represented. So that moving forward, especially going into the next, midterm elections, where again, House of Representatives members get voted in every 2 years, senators get voted on every 6 years, presidents get voted on every 4 years. So there's a reason for the different lengths of terms. And you need to understand what these people are actually putting in front to be voted on and what kind of laws they're actually truly supporting and enacting. And the one thing that stands out to me most is that nothing in the Constitution that I've read, and mind you, again, it was written well before the Industrial Revolution and before corporations even became a thing, but there is no mention of representing corporations. There is no mention of representing billionaires. There is no mention of representing only the wealthy. And so we need to keep reminding people that this document in our nation is meant to represent the people. And if the people are the ones who get to determine who actually represents them, then we need to put people in office that are truly going to represent the best interests of the people and not just the 38 billionaires or the small number of people that have the most wealth in this nation. And so please keep that in mind as we move forward. And once again, we thank you all for joining us. And we will move right into our next part of analyzing and discussing the Constitution and our current state of affairs in our nation in our next episode. So please come back and join us when we return. Thanks again so much, and and blessings to you all. We sign off, and happy July 4th.
Absolutely.